an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sabriel by Garth Nix, chapters 27, 28, and 29, and epilogue. In these chapters, well, it seems like it's over. I feel like it's probably not over. On the plus side, now we have 2 cats, which seems like a good thing. On the minus side, Sabriel kind of dies, but doesn't in the end. I really liked this ending, and I'm really curious about what's coming down the road for her, because it just feels like this is not over. We'll see. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you to Abbey for commissioning this. So Abby's saying, sorry about being rubbish at emailing you. Oh, no worries. There was a little bit of confusion on my end because of something she had said in her commission, but it turns out that it's just that I overread a little bit last time. A chapter that she had been intending for me to include in the finale episode, but I just already had covered it. So everything is fine. Guys, these chapters are the finale of this book. And I don't know why, because I knew that the end was coming, but I just didn't think it was going to wrap as quickly as it did. And I think that might be part of why I'm feeling like this isn't over. I'm not even trying to say it was a little too easy, because it wasn't easy. A lot of people died. Like less than Sabriel actually thought. Once she gets out there and she sees how many people made it to the other side, she's kind of like, oh, all right, we didn't do as badly as I expected. But this isn't like the face-off between Harry and Voldemort when the only person involved is them two in Quirrell. This is not a personal matter. This is a huge group of people, a whole town being attacked by this guy. And I think that's part of what I found so interesting, is that this is not a world in which anything needs to be hidden. Everybody's aware that magic is real. They may look on it with different levels of appreciation or fear or whatever, but we all know about it. It exists more above the wall than below, but it's not unheard of below. And the fact that we are intermingling this like magical world with a world that has cars and automatic weapons and electricity, it just never fails to feel really weird to me, because Harry Potter, which, you know, I always use as my yardstick simply because of how universally known it is, this is a world that you could argue is similar in some ways. Harry lives in our world, and then he crosses a threshold into a magical world in which all of the technology is significantly less advanced or simply can't function around magic. And magic is really kept at a remove in that regard. But there's the added level of secrecy to it. You're not allowed to talk about it. People's minds get wiped if they see things. And so magic does exist within our universe. You know, there are people standing in the middle of a street with a bunch of cars casting spells, and it's not like that's unheard of to happen. But it is not something that they allow people to see and walk away and talk about. Never mind get involved in. This whole scene involves plenty of people who have no magical ability whatsoever, and they're simply being used for labor. They are being used for transport, to man some of the weapons and guns, especially as like backup once it becomes clear that using guns is going to fail, because this guy is able to shut those down. So it's essentially like what I had low-key hoped for a little bit at the end of Harry Potter, which is a unification of muggles and wizards coming together to fight Voldemort as a group. And how interesting would that have been to see the ways in which muggles would deal with somebody with magical powers, because there have to be things that we use as muggles that Voldemort isn't ready for. And how would he combat them, you know? So there's something about this that's really different in that respect. And also the fact that because of how, like, again, you know, Harry is at the school and most of the action takes place at the school. And eventually him leaving the school is really significant of him leaving a place that is safe, where he has learned everything he knows, where there's friends and people in authority who are better at magic than him. Whereas Sabriel, we don't spend almost any time at the school. We don't get to know her friends. We don't know the teachers. There is no emotional connection to the school at all. So when she returns to the school and the action takes place there in the end, there's not a lot of significance to that. The significance is that she is recognized by everybody, but they all realize that something has really changed, because now she is the Abhorsen, and they are calling her that, and they can see that is what she is. She had just been another student, and they knew that she had abilities and whatever, but it's not like she was set so completely apart from everything. And now it's really clear that this is part of her past. This is not, she's not going to finish this mission and then just turn around and like re-enroll in school, I would not think. Who knows though? Maybe she will. I don't know what kind of algebra she knows. Maybe she needs to brush up on a little bit of her biology. I don't know what an Abhorsen's deal is. But my expectation is that she is going to go back to her family home and take these two cats and Touchstone with her. So anyway, I'm going to start back. I'm backing up a little bit. So chapter 27, these dudes are all just finally finishing up pulling the stones off of the cairn that the sarcophagus is laid inside. And everybody is really having a hard time. It's almost like this thing is radioactive or something. They're all sweating and shaking. One guy is, once they finally finish, he like runs off to the side and throws up. She can feel herself sweating, and her hair is like sort of standing on end at the back of her neck, the way that it does when you get, you all know what that feeling is like. It's one of those things that when you feel it happen, there's something so primal about it that you're surprised it can still happen. When we have like the kind, we love to cling to logic as humans and behave as if that's the antidote to fear. And sometimes it is, but sometimes logic can create fear. If you are logical enough, you can see the danger. And there is a certain feeling that comes from that this specific sensation, the way it's described, the hair on the back of her neck frizzing up, skin crawling. That is the kind of feeling that I get. For those of you who are patrons, you will know, when I do the Unspooked episodes in October, I usually do 3, sometimes 4 special episodes throughout the month of October that are scary stories and allegedly true, maybe not, or just, like freaky encounters that people have had. And I have a hard time because I read them aloud and I have to keep the house quiet. Oftentimes I'll do those alone, and I'll be sitting in my office reading about this, this person that he came upon when he was hiking in the woods, and the guy was just standing there, and he tapped the guy on the shoulder and was like, "Hey buddy," and the dude turns around and doesn't have a face. And I'm reading this alone in my house, and my entire body is covered in goosebumps right now. I don't know if y'all can see this, but I'm having a goosebumps reaction just talking secondhand about recording that episode. Like, that was really tough. And there have been more than one time when I'm in the middle of recording that and Owen comes home unexpectedly and I have almost hit the fucking ceiling because I am not ready and I just get so startled. Abbey is saying, I'm too much of a scaredy cat even to listen to Unspooked. They're super fun, Abbey, but it is, I would recommend listening when you're with somebody, like in a car. I've listened to, Owen is not super into scary stories like this because he doesn't believe in ghosts and he doesn't believe in supernatural stuff. But nevertheless, there are some that will get to him. And we took a trip to Oklahoma last summer and drove home and we listened to, or no, last fall. And we drove home and listened to some of the ones that are set in this national park in the woods. And we had to stop and get gas. And we parked and he was like, I am glad we're taking a break because I was really starting to get pretty flipped out. And I was like, all right, cool. I feel like I've done a good job then. So yeah, they will get under your skin a little bit. But anyway, so yeah, this feeling, I just kept on thinking about that. Like that something is here. I feel something watching me, like that inexplicable sense of danger and not quite being able to identify what the danger is, which is the worst feeling in the world. That like you don't have any control because you can't figure out how to defend yourself since you don't know what it is that's coming at you, but you really are aware that you should be doing something. And she says that it is very strongly protected and that we are going to have to use a spell to get it out. And the first thing that she tries to do is have all of the people who have charter marks like link hands and touch her last. And she's going to put her hand on the sarcophagus and try and open it this way. This does not work. Sabriel felt the charter magic welling up the line, the marks glowing brighter and brighter in her mind till she almost lost her normal vision in their brilliance. She shuffled forwards into the cairn, each step bringing that all too familiar nausea, the pins and needles, uncontrollable shaking. But the marks were strong in her mind, stronger than the sickness. She reached the bronze sarcophagus, slapped her hand down, and let the charter magic go. Instantly, there was an explosion of light, and a terrible scream echoed all through the cairn. The bronze grew hot, and Sabriel snatched back her hand, the palm red and blistered. A second later, steam billowed out all around the sarcophagus, great gouts of scalding steam, forcing Sabriel out, the whole line going down like dominoes, tumbling out of the cairn and down the hill. So, I loved this because this is super unexpected. It's like getting hot is something that I can sort of expect, but then it being like steam, and she says that there's this horrible unearthly scream, and once the steam is mentioned later, I couldn't help but think of it as the wailing of a tea kettle that's like at full boil, that like shrill high shriek that comes with that. I don't know how people live with those types of tea kettles. Like, I get that it's helpful to know that your tea is boiling, but the stress of that sound is just too much for me, and I hate it. I have an electric kettle, thank you very much. And there's something about the steam that feels really practical and tangible in a way that I didn't expect. I thought, however, it fought back, for lack of a better phrasing, would be something equally magical, that there would be like a pulse that would send them all flying, or something that like sort of knocked them out, or, it just didn't respond at all. For all I knew, it could just, sit there and she's touching it and trying to get something to happen and it simply doesn't react. But steam pouring out of it is so tactile, and it's something that I have a perfect frame of reference for. I have gotten steam burns before many times. It's awful. So I just didn't expect the description of whatever happened here to be something that I had any sort of frame of reference for at all. And then it turned out to be something deeply familiar that I'm like, oh yeah, I've encountered that a million times. And she realizes that there's just not enough of them. It's either we don't have the skill or the power, is what she says. And she's thinking about how much she wishes that Mogget was here because he would know what to do. And Touchstone says, I think we need more charter mages. And she's like, well, yeah, where are we going to get them? And Touchstone's like, what about your school? And Sabriel, when he says that, she like sits up so suddenly that she like pushes him off balance. But then she bends down and kisses him and is like, oh my God, I didn't even think of that. There are 35 girls with charter marks. Of course we can do that. So then she has to like sort of wrestle with her conscience and the fact that these girls are young. And does she have the right to involve them in something like this and risk them in this way? Like, this is serious shit they're about to get into. And Touchstone is like, they're involved whether they like it or not. He's coming over the wall. He's going to break the other stones. And once he does that, Ancestieri is going to turn into the old kingdom. It's not going to be the same. This is going to affect them. And she tries to be like, but they're like children. And he says, we need them. And she's like, all right, fine. So they go and tell Horace that they're going to need to move the sarcophagus to Wyverley College. Because what they initially had planned to do was reach out to the college and get all of the girls to come here to where they are in the cairn. But there's just not time to send somebody out to them and bring them back. So they decide that they're going to have to go to them. So they pull it up out of the cairn. There's this one dude who has like a rope around it, and it is really affecting everybody. And it's also affecting everything they pass. Dragging it within 20 yards of the trucks stopped their engines, put out electrical lights, and disrupted the telephone. Curiously, the horse, a placid old mare, didn't seem overly frightened by the gleaming sarcophagus, despite its bronze surface sluggishly crawling with stomach-churning perversions of charter marks. She wasn't a happy horse, but not a panicked one either. We'll have to drive the wagon, Sabriel said. I don't think the scouts can withstand the sickness much longer. Touchstone shuddered. I'm not sure I can either. Like everyone else, he was pale, eyes red-rimmed, his nose dripping, and teeth chattering. So again, with like there being these really tactile moments, this moment for him where he's like, the nausea, your hair standing on end, that all for me, I can really easily see as being a reaction to magic. But Touchstone just looks like he's got the flu. And that's so different than what I was expecting. It's like there's a plague that's slowly starting to set in. His nose is dripping. I'm not thinking that's happening, you know? And I was just like, what, really? That's what he... Ugh, yikes. And again, just another frame of reference. I've been sick recently. And the idea of feeling like that when I'm near something like this, I'm like, oh, that is rough. So yeah, they get up there into the wagon and they head out, and it is not quick. Like, this horse is going as fast as she can, but they have a really heavy load, and there's just a real sense of urgency that this pace is not matching, and it's giving her some anxiety, which I deeply understand. The sarcophagus seemed to buzz and chuckle behind them. Neither of them mentioned that Kerrigor might arrive, fog-wreathed, before the night did. Sabriel found herself looking behind every few seconds back along the road. This meant catching glimpses of the vilely shifting surface of the coffin, but she couldn't help it. The shadows were lengthening, and every time she caught a glimpse of some tree's pale bark or a whitewashed mile marker, fear twitched in her gut. Was that fog curling down the road? Wyverley College seemed much farther than a mile. The sun was only a 3/4 disk by the time they saw the trucks turn off the road, turning up the bricked drive that led to the wrought iron gates. Home, thought Sabriel for a moment, but that was no longer true. It had been home for the better part of her life, but that was past. It was the home of her childhood, when she was only Sabriel. Now she was also Abhorsen. Now her home lay in the Old Kingdom, as did her responsibilities. But, like her, These traveled. So, okay. They get in there, and her old school marm is not delighted to see her. This woman is, again, we didn't really get to know her, so I didn't really remember that Mrs. Umbraid was so unpleasant. But she is not picking up on the, what's the word I want? She's not picking up in the atmosphere of the situation. She's not reading the room. These two show up with a clearly enchanted magical coffin. One of them is Sabriel, and she is just not seeing that there's something happening here that she needs to stop and listen to and maybe acknowledge that it's outside of her purview. And she starts arguing with Sabriel. And Sabriel is just listen, you need to go get Miss Greenwood and get all of the girls from the senior magic classes. And Horace is the one that has to shout at her to fucking get going before she finally moves along. And even after she does, eventually Sabriel has to come up behind her and put a silencing spell on her, because all she is fucking doing is griping about the intrusion, and I know people from this and that this shouldn't be happening, acting like this is not a hugely, obviously important military operation. We've got soldiers showing up that are unloading crates of weapons and shit. She is not seeing that there is something happening here. Just as Mrs. Umbraid reached her staff, all the lights went out. For a moment, there was total shocked quiet. Then the noise redoubled. Girls screaming, soldiers shouting, crashes and bangs as people ran into things and each other. Sabriel stood where she was and conjured the charter marks for light. They came easily, flowing down her fingertips like cool water from a shower. She let them hang there for a moment, then cast them at the ceiling, drops of light that grew to the size of dinner plates and cast a steady yellow light all down the hall. Someone else was also casting similar lights down by Mrs. Umbraid, and Sabriel recognized the work of Magistrix Greenwood. She smiled at that recognition, a slight upturning of just one side of her mouth. She knew the lights had gone out because Kerrigor had passed the electric substation, and that was halfway between the school and the village. So, here's the thing. Earlier I was talking about the fact that there isn't much of a connection between the reader and the people that Sabriel went to school with, her teachers, the school. And I have to admit, I'm missing that here. I feel look back at where we started this story. We have the flashback to Abhorsen and Sabriel's birth in the prologue. Or the first chapter. I don't remember how it's set up. And then we jump to Sabriel in school as a grown girl. I don't need to see all of her years in school. I don't need to see how she's raised. I don't need all that. But I think this author would have been well served to give us more time to see Sabriel living her life as an ordinary girl. I would have liked to see her making friends, and I would have liked to see her connecting with people and maybe not connecting with them, as the case may be, and give us some kind of emotional attachment to these people and this school, so that when she returns and her classmates are looking at her differently, that has more of an effect on us. I want to feel what Sabriel is feeling at this point. Simultaneous familiarity and total alienness of realizing this is just not my world anymore. I'm not really a part of this the way that I thought. I would like to feel maybe a little grief on her part for saying goodbye to a life that she had that is simply not hers anymore. Because whether you loved the life that you had or not, there's always still nostalgia associated with moments and times of your life. And I feel like, you know, moving on and being an abhorsen isn't even something that she really wanted. Like, she did it because she felt like it was necessary to save her father, but her intention was to go save her dad, have him take his spot back, and then she, like, finishes school. That was how she headed out into this. It was a temporary thing for her to restore the order that she was used to and put the rightful authority figure back in his place safely, as her mentor and father and leader, so that she can be, you know, her footing is regained and her place in the universe feels like it makes sense again. And I feel like the way that the book starts so abruptly, we only get a brief moment of her at school before we jump into the emergency that's happening. We hardly meet anybody, and there's just, I feel like there is something missing for me of what a story like this often is, which is it is usually meant to symbolize a rite of passage from being a child to an adult, taking on responsibility that you did not ask for, that you do not particularly want, but you have to because somebody has to, and nobody else is necessarily capable of what you're capable of. And if we don't get to see the childhood portion before this gets thrust upon her, it doesn't mean quite as much. So that's the only thing that I feel like is really missing here, is there isn't a lot of lead up to her suddenly being forced into a huge rescue mission that's like, you know, I would also like to have seen her training as well, and what she has strengths in and what she doesn't, what she enjoys doing and what she doesn't. I'm realizing, looking back on this, that I don't really know who Sabriel is. I know how she functions in this world because of what her family is, and because of what her family is, what she has been taught, and what she is good at because of that. But I don't feel her agency a lot of the time. There isn't a feeling of her having chosen anything, and if she resents that, I don't really know that. The only thing I know is that she finds it unnerving when people call her abhorsen instead of Sabriel. But that's about as much of an indicator as we get as to how she really feels about taking this place now. You know, and then that's a whole separate issue from her father's death. Like her mourning him and her feeling like there is, like, the plan that she had really fell apart and she wasn't ready for it. That is a separate thing from having lost a parent. And we also don't really get to know Abhorsen well either. So his loss doesn't mean as much to us. It's just, I feel like there is a lot of setup here that could have made a lot of this have more emotional impact and have connected me more to her as a person and let me understand what she had been hoping her life to be versus what it's turning out to be. But I don't really have a good grasp of that at all. Abbey is saying, I agree on this. It was the author's first book. I guess he hadn't quite got the hang of that stuff yet. Yeah, fair. So yeah, I'm just kind of like, you know, that's part of why I'm saying at the end of this that I feel like it's not over, is because I'm hoping it's not over, because I don't really know anything about her. And we joined her at such a transformative period in her life but I didn't get to really see the transformation happen. I just saw her becoming the abhorsen. I don't really know enough about who she was before to compare and contrast and make any sort of assessment about, you know, what her future looks like. Or, you know, like I said, do I expect her to go to her family home? But for all I know, she might decide she needs to finish school. And that's how little I know of her as a character, is I genuinely am not sure exactly what she's going to pick. The only thing that gives me any sort of indication is this little monologue here talking about the fact that, like, this was her past and this is no longer her home. Her home was the, you know, like, fortress of the abhorsens. She is saying that, the words are there, but I'm not feeling it. And if not for her specifically stating this, I would not have a firm enough grasp of who she is to make this call. And that's sort of a shame in terms of character development, because I like to feel that even though the author, it's their job to tell me what's going to happen or tell me like how a character is thinking about something, I like feeling like I know a character so well that I can predict what path they're going to take. And basically, I have only seen her during absolute crises. And so in terms of like what she wants after achieving her goal here, I just don't know what that looks like. And I don't even know really quite enough about what abhorsons do from day to day to know like what choosing to be the abhorsen looks like either. I mean, we've heard about them, her father came and set up these things at the wall so as to stop the dead, because that was a real problem before. But then we have the Tales from Touchstone, where there was an abhorsen who was like kind of part of the court, right, with the queen, and seemed to be sort of on hand for the queen all the time. Like, obviously, since there's not royalty in a royal family anymore, that wouldn't be the case. But like, is that how it always used to function, or was that particular to that abhorsen and their relationship with the queen? I would like to know more about all of the history of this so that I can know what I think she would do and also what it was traditionally that was done. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I really have admired so much of the imagination behind this story, and so like the emphasis on magic that surrounds the dead and being able to travel into the land of the dead and then come back again, and all of that I find really fascinating, using bells to sort of like manage these energies, having charter magic versus free magic. These are all really interesting world building things and mechanics for it all. But the characters really need work. And I feel like they were not given room to breathe here. The author was so eager to get into the universe that he had made and to show off specific creatures that he had imagined up, that he didn't stop to think about whether we were really, really going to care about the people involved, beyond the fact that we don't want undead horrors taking everything over, Abbey is saying you have excellent questions. Well, thank you, ma'am. So anyway, yeah, characters are my thing. Those are always my favorite part of stories like this. So, and it's so funny considering that characters are usually my priority. I always find it amusing how long it takes for me to realize I'm not necessarily completely connecting to something I'm watching or reading because the characters don't feel fully developed to me. I really need to start realizing that a little sooner on. Not that it helps in any way that I know sooner, but the fact that I'm just like, why is this not quite getting there for me? And I just sit and puzzle over it. And then it's not until like the last pages that I'm like, oh, I don't know her well. Abbey says, this is my least favorite book in the series, and what you're saying is a lot of the reason why. Okay, cool. Well, that's encouraging then. And this is, first books are often like that. I mean, so many people wanted to read Dresden Files along with me and Rashawn, and they really had a hard time getting past the first 2 or 3 books. And it's understandable. Going back, they're a lot flatter. The main character is less likable and much more infuriating. And there's just a lot of like missteps and things that are tough that, and I had no problem getting through them because I was wrapped up enough in this like wild world that I flew through anyway. And that's how I feel about this. None of what I'm saying is enough to make me go, oh, this wasn't a good book at all. That's not how I feel. But it just, there is that piece missing. That's like so hard to put your finger on until you really start to think about, well, maybe if like asking yourself questions about what this character wants and feels, that's when you start to be like, oh, I have no answers to these. That's what it is. There it is. So anyway, back to this. So Sabriel is dealing with the electrical outage, and Mrs. Umbraid is still in the middle of, I was never more shocked to see one of our, and Sabriel has to shut her up. And I love the fact, because I had pictured her as like collapsing to the ground. But it turns out that Mrs. Umbraid is just standing there frozen like a statue, which there's something like comical about that as well. And I really would like to see this moment on screen where Sabriel just touches the back of her neck and this woman just freezes, and she's like, all right, now that we have this annoying biddy out of the way, let's actually talk about what we're going to do and be proactive. How about this? She says, as you can see, the army is temporarily taking over. I am assisting Colonel Horace, who is in charge. We need all the girls in the 2 senior magic classes to come down to the Great Hall. With you, Magistrix Greenwood, please. I would also like to say that I love the word Magistrix. I don't know if this was made up for this book or if it's something that's like just super antiquated and I haven't run across it before. But I love it because it comes across as non-gendered and gender neutral is the word I'm looking for. And sounds sort of like vaguely threatening, but also respectable. I just really like the word and the use of it. Something has come from the old kingdom. We will shortly be attacked by the dead. So there will be a danger to my students, Miss Greenwood spoke. She looked Sabriel in the face, as if in recognition, and then added, Abhorsen. There will be danger to everyone, Sabriel said bleakly, but without the aid of the charter mages here, there isn't even a chance. Well, replied Miss Greenwood with some decision, we'd better get organized then. I'll go and fetch Celine and Elamir. I think they're the only 2 charter mages among the prefects. They can organize the others. Mrs. Perch, you'd better take charge of the evacuation to the North Tower, as I imagine Mrs. Umbraid will be deep in thought. Mrs. Swan, you'd best round up the cook and the maids. Get some fresh water, food, and candles, too. Mr. Arkler, if you would be so kind as to fetch the swords from the gymnasium. I love this. This bitch has it under control. She knows what we need. She's going to get it. This is all being handled. And I imagine that is a really welcome change for Sabriel, since she has had to be the brains of the operation. Not that everybody around her is stupid, but she just has experience in some things that nobody else does, and she has to make her calls, you know? Touchstone and the scouts had the sarcophagus down and roped up. It now seemed to glow with its own ugly inner light, the flickering free magic marks floating on the surface like scum or clots in blood. Apart from the scouts pulling the ropes, no one went close to it. Soldiers were everywhere, coiling out barbed wire, filling sandbags from the rose gardens, preparing firing positions on the 2nd floor, tying trip flares. But in all this commotion, there was an empty circle around the glistening coffin of Roger. So this is pretty intense because she's like having to push herself forward towards it, and it is getting even stronger, this revulsion that she's feeling. And she is guessing that the reason why this is strengthened is because the sun is going down. So it's just gaining power because of that. So she goes and she's looking at all of her bells and thinking about how they are going to be inadequate to standing up to Kerrigor. And she also has this sword, and it's supposed to be helpful. It's forged by a wall maker and everything, but she doesn't really know it well, and she's just not feeling super confident in the tools that she has at her disposal. I left this place knowing almost nothing about the Old Kingdom, and I've come back with not much more, Sabriel thought. I am the most ignorant Abhorsen in centuries, and perhaps one of the most sorely tried. A clatter of shots interrupted her thoughts, followed by the zing of a rocket arcing up into the sky, its yellow trail reaching down toward the road. More shots followed, a rapid volley, then sudden silence. The rocket burst into a white parachute flare that slowly descended. In its harsh magnesium brilliance, Sabriel saw fog rolling up the road, thick and wet, stretching back into the dark as far as she could see. Dun, dun, dun. So she's watching the fog roll up to the gates and feeling the deaths of some of the men that are out there. I just can't emphasize enough how unfair that seems to me. Like, she has to just endure so much, and on top of that has to feel the deaths of everybody that was out there. That's just rude. Come on, give her a break. Suddenly, she felt something that wasn't a death, but things already dead. She stood bolt upright and exclaimed, "Colonel, the sun is truly down and something is coming, something ahead of the fog." She drew her sword as she spoke, the colonel's blade flickering out a second later. The wiring party looked around, startled, then bolted for the steps in the corridor. On either side of the door, 2-man teams cocked the heavy tripod-mounted machine guns and laid their swords across the newly made sandbag walls. So, then we get another amazing description of what it sounds like when the dead are walking, and it's just so creepy and terrible. And there are hundreds of them. And they hit the iron gates and push them over in a split second. Which, how though? How? Like, I really wanted more description of what was going on there. Because you imagine gates being toppled, and you imagine an enormous amount of either weight or momentum, or both, being behind it. But the dead are rotting and mostly just bones, which are not heavy, and there's nothing to say that they're coming at them particularly quickly, and I don't think that they can use magic, so I don't think it was magic, but they just throw it down in a moment. How? So the guns work for a while, and they're able to shoot these things down. And it's not like, they're already dead. It's not like they're, quote, killing them. But they're basically, like, shredding them into tons of pieces so that they're not able to get back up again. And there's also that wire that's hanging there that's, like, helping to stop them as well. Abbey says they're animated by free magic rather than muscles, so stronger than normal. Okay. The firing slowed, but before it could entirely cease, another wave of hands came stumbling, crawling, running through the gateway, slipping, tumbling over the wall. Hundreds of them, so densely packed they crushed the wire and came on, till the last of them were mown down by the guns at the very foot of the front steps. Some, still with a slight vestige of human intelligence, retreated, only to be caught in great gouts of flame from white phosphorus grenades thrown out from the second floor. So I found that really interesting, that some of them still are alive enough, or have remnants of life and thought enough, to have a sense of self-preservation, where they're like, fuck this, and they just, like, run off, which I find really funny for some reason. And all I can think of with this is the scenes in the last season of Game of Thrones at Winterfell, which I feel like, because of how perfectly lined up it is, like zombies attacking a castle, that imagery just continually popped up in my head as I was reading this. So let's see. The last of the hands flopped and crawled in crazy circles till more bullets thudded into them and made them still. Looking out at the carpet of bodies, Sabriel saw the flickering fires from the lanterns and lumps of phosphorus burning like candles in some ghastly charnel house. The hands were already dead, but even so, this mass destruction made her sicker than any free magic. She went inside, sheathing her sword. Only then did she remember the bells. So she's in the middle of thinking about this, and she heads down. Let's see, there are more soldiers in the corridor. And right, this is the part, and I really liked this. She comes across all of the soldiers who are basically backup for when the guns finally fail, because they know that the use of guns is not something that they're going to have for the entire battle. Eventually, Kerrigor is going to be able to disable them. there was an air of controlled nervousness about them. Not bravado exactly, just a strange mixture of competence and cynicism. Whatever it was, it made Sabriel walk casually among them, as if she were in no hurry at all. "Evening, miss. Good to hear the guns, hey? Practically never work up north. Won't need us at this rate. Not like the perimeter, is it, ma'am? Good luck with the bloke in the metal cigar case, miss." "Good luck to all of you," replied Sabriel, trying to smile in answer to their grins. Then the firing started again, and she winced, losing the smile. But their attention was off her, focused back outside. They weren't nearly as casual as they pretended, Sabriel thought, as she edged towards the side doors leading from the corridor into the great hall. Yeah, I really like that. This sort of moment of calm, but it's not real calm. And also knowing that a lot of these guys are going to die, and they're very aware of that as well. And they're going to do their job, and they're going to do their best. But it's just this fatalism to it that's really sad, you know. So they gather up the charter mages here. And she notes that the students are moving a lot more quickly than everybody else because they have not been near this damn sarcophagus all day. So they're not being like worn down by it. And she sees her friends, Sulin and Elamir, and said, let's see, she felt far distant from them now. She probably looked it too, she thought, seeing respect and something like wonder in their eyes. Even the charter marks on their foreheads looked like fragile cosmetic replicas, though she knew they were real. It was so unfair that they had to be caught up in this. So that's really interesting. Like, I'm curious about these charter marks. I don't, know much about them. And the way that she said that makes me wonder if there isn't actually cosmetic replicas. Like, do people get plastic surgery to make it look like they have a charter mark when they don't? Like, that sounds like a total thing that people would do. And I am fascinated by the whole idea of that. And then all of a sudden, the gunfire stops. And it's such a hugely jarring moment that one of the girls like kind of giggles because she's just like, what the fuck is going on? But Sabriel feels all of these deaths all at the same time, right at that moment. And she realizes that Kerrigor is coming and that it was him that stopped the guns. It's not like the assault is over. It's just that he has taken the guns away from them, as was expected. So this is when they start to hold hands, and they begin their spell. She's saying, she's thinking about, because she says something about, Lieutenant, please put your men in among the girls. Anywhere else, at any other time, there would have been ribald jokes and giggles about that. Here, with the dead about the building and the sarcophagus brooding in their midst, it was simply an instruction. I really like that. It is the kind of, like, that's how you can tell how serious a situation is whether or not people make the jokes they normally make. So they're all holding hands, and she is bringing the thought of the charter marks to the forefront. And it says, the marks grew, power flowing round and round the ring, growing in force till it started to project inwards like the narrowing vortex of a whirlpool. Golden light began to stream around the sarcophagus, visible streaks rotating clockwise around it with greater and greater speed. So eventually, with more steam and shrieking and whatnot, the sarcophagus gets lifted off the floor and begins to spin itself around. And finally it flies open and the lid just comes off and flies 50 feet away. And the body is there. And there's this moment where Miss Greenwood says, why, he looks just like you, and looks up at Touchstone. Now, I am aware that they're half brothers, but I still had a moment of total panic when she said that, where I thought for a second that Touchstone was actually Kerrigor and that this had all been a setup. And that, like, Kerrigor had actually been some sort of projection that Touchstone made and wasn't even real, but Touchstone was using Sabriel to get him to his body faster by creating a sense of urgency that there was somebody else after them. Which, thank God that's not the case, but that would have been pretty fucked up, right? But then I realized, oh, it's just meant to be like, because Touchstone couldn't have this body and not, unless I guess he was possessing somebody, which I guess he could have done. But she's seen him with his shirt off. She saw him naked. So I haven't heard about like possession that happens without any sort of external evidence that there is a creature involved. So finally, all of these other people start to like fly into the hallway, and they're trying to batten down all of the doors behind them because he has gotten inside the main doors. So Sabriel's like, all right, we've got to do the final rites because she has to burn the body. That's part of the, the deal of getting rid of this thing is doing those rites and causing it to ignite. But this is all, she's distracted from it because the entire north wall explodes and coats everything in dust and completely like ruins their concentration and focus. And she hears the blood price must be paid. And of course, your instinct is that this is Kerrigor. It's not. This is fucking Mogget, released from the collar. Dislike. I really am much more afraid of Mogget than I am of Kerrigor, to be honest. So, yeah. I must deliver my last burden. Then the bargain is done, and I may turn to retribution. And this thing comes at her, and some guy tries to stab it in the back with his sword, and the guy just bursts into flames. It just burns him alive, like with no warning. It's real bad. And then this thing puts down in front of her, I bring you the Abhorsen's sword and the bell called Asteriel. That it laid carefully down, the silver glinting momentarily before it was lowered into the sea of dust. Come forward, Abhorsen. It is long since time that we begun. And the thing laughed, and I love this description. The thing laughed a sound like a match igniting. I love that so much. And Kerrigor is coming at her as well and sees that Mogget is about to try and kill her. And Kerrigor is like, absolutely fucking not. She's mine. She's the Abhorsen, and I need her blood, and what are you doing? And Mogget is like, you know what, motherfucker? And heads to Kerrigor to fight him. And it turns into this weird thing. So it's smashing into his shadowy substance like a hammer tenderizing meat. For a moment, no one moved, shocked by the suddenness of the attack. Then Kerrigor's dark shape slowly recongealed, long tendrils of bitter night wrapping around his brilliant attacker, choking and absorbing it with the implacable voracity of an octopus strangling a bright-shelled turtle. Wow! What a crazy image! An octopus eating a bright-shelled turtle. I never really thought about octopi being able to eat hard-shelled creatures at all. That, like, I always picture them eating fish, things with, a thin skin, some scales, but not like, is that a thing? That's crazy. And as they're fighting, Sabriel is looking away, and she is noticing all of the people around her who have died. And if it were anyone but Sabriel, people would be like, oh, maybe they're passed out, but she can feel when people die. So she knows for sure. And she also knows that Touchstone is alive. And she pulls herself over to him, but in the debris of the wall coming down, his leg was broken, and he's trying to tell her to run. And she's like, yeah, that's definitely going to happen. I just couldn't help but laugh when he even suggested that. He's like, leave and live a normal life. I'm like, how though, Touchstone? How do you propose she do that? Yeah, no, shut up. She picks up the bell and she thinks she's going to use that, but it's so completely coated in dust that she can't actually use it. And this isn't just like a practical thing. It says it would not ring true until cleaned with patience, magic, and steady nerves. So it's not just like she could just wipe it off and then it's fine to use. This is something that if it gets fucked up like this, like she needs time to set it to rights, or else it's just not going to function the way it's supposed to. Her father's sword was only a few paces farther away. She picked it up and watched the charter marks flow along the blade. This time, they didn't run through the normal inscription, but said, "The Clare saw me, the Wallmaker made me, the King quenched me, the Abhorsen wields me, so that no dead shall walk in life, for this is not their path." So, she uses this sword on Kerrigor, and because of how that's set up, you really expect that Kerrigor is going to just like burst into screaming flame or something as soon as she thrusts it through his middle. That is not what happens, everybody. Kerrigor, first of all, is a little bit busy still digesting Mogget. And once she puts the sword through, there's a real like Boromir moment where she's like he grabs the sword and pulls it into himself. Is it Boromir or is that Aragorn? But anyway, she gets pulled really, really close to him, but she still has this ring on. And he is saying that he wants to kiss her. And I can't tell what exactly he's going, like, is he just being creep and doing something that he knows is going to make her uncomfortable and horrified? Or is it supposed to be that he's going to like put her into like a enchanted sleep or something by doing this? So let's see. Oh, right. So he's in the middle of like, of leaning towards her, and this girl who is slowly dying on the floor touches Sabriel and sends the last of the magic that she has into Sabriel and allows her to move because she has been frozen by Kerrigor and cannot defend herself. But that little bit of extra magic gets her to move, and she rings the two bells that she's got. And it says it was not the clear, true sound it should be, for somehow the bulk of Kerrigor took the sound in and warped it. But it had an effect. Kerrigor slid back and was diminished till he was little more than twice Sabriel's height. But he was not subject to Sabriel's will. Sareneth had not bound him, and Kibeth had only forced him back. Sabriel rang the bells again, concentrating on the difficult counterpoint between them. And she, for a moment, is able to turn Kerrigor from this, like, huge, intimidating figure. Fiery eyes and mouth ran into each other like molten wax, and his shadow stuff folded into a narrow column of smoke roaring up into the ceiling. It hovered among the rafters for a moment, then descended with a hideous scream straight into the Roger body's open mouth. With that scream, Sareneth and Kibeth cracked, shards of silver falling like broken stars crashing to the earth. And then this is when she does the sword thing. No sword can harm me. He pulls her against him, and she has her ring that she took off that she used last time to get Mogget back under control, and it's growing. His breath was overpowering, reeking of blood. She turned her head aside and felt dry corpse-like lips. And she says that she sees a flash, the faintest spark of blazing white. She unclenched her left fist, felt the silver ring slip down her finger. Was it expanding? So Mogget, and this is not Mogget like saving her on purpose because he wants to help. Mogget is this other creature who really wants revenge and is totally fine with biding his time a little bit longer as long as he gets his revenge in the end, is what I think is going on here. So basically the fact that Mogget is inside of Kerrigor makes him susceptible to the same imprisonment that Mogget is susceptible to. So she drops it around his head because it expands big enough. He seems surprised, but not anxious. His right hand went up to touch the band, fingernails falling as he did so, bone already pushing through at the fingertips. What is this? Some relic of the ring constricted, cutting through the pulpy flesh of his neck, revealing the solid darkness within. That, too, was compressed, force inwards, pulsating as it tried to escape. The two flaming eyes looked down in disbelief. Impossible, croaked Kerrigor. So he shoves her back and is laying there and starts convulsing. And all of a sudden tears into two. And there is a bright white and a black, like two parts. I'm trying to find exactly where this is to describe it to you guys. Oh yeah, here it is. The column collapsed on itself like a demolished building. There were charter marks on the ring again, but Sabriel couldn't read them. And she uses Rana, who calls the people who are dying into death, and the people who aren't lay down and fall into like a deep enchanted sleep. The mound of darkness that had been Kerrigor split into two distinct hemispheres. One was black as coal, the other gleaming white. Gradually, they melted into two distinct forms, two cats, joined at the throat like Siamese twins. Then the silver ring split in two, a ring around each neck, and the cats separated. The rings lost their brilliance, slowly changing color and texture till they were red leather bands, each supporting a miniature bell. Two small cats sat side by side, one black, one white. Both leaned forward and spat up a silver ring. What? Meanwhile, he had stabbed her through the gut. So she is dying, dead by the end of this chapter, and the epilogue is her in death. And her family is all there. And they're basically like, listen, it's not time. They're like, you're the last of the Abhorsen. They're basically like, you need to go back and have kids. Which I was like, that's a little presumptuous, guys. How about you back off? But whatever. And she's like, at first, she's just, I'm so tired. I can't. But as they tell her to live, she feels the strength coming into her. And the last person to touch her, she's pretty sure, is her father, touching her hand before she comes back to herself. And she sees Touchstone, and he is crying and, like, begging her to come back. But his eyes are so filled with tears that he can't see that she's opened her eyes and that she is back. And she's looking around and seeing all of the people who have died. Horace is dead, which bummed me out. The Magistrix is dead, again, bummed me out. Her friend Elamir, at least half the soldiers. Like, it's not as bad as she thought it was going to be, but it's still pretty fucking bad. And he says, Sabriel, you're alive. Yes, said Sabriel with some surprise. I am. And that is the end of the book. So, so that was a hell of an ending. It just felt kind of abrupt. So I'm just really curious what the hell is going to come next. I don't remember, because Abbey, you started to commission the next book. I'm pretty sure I saw that, right? But I don't remember what the title of it was. It was some another name, it looked like. L'Oreal. All right, cool. So yeah, guys, stay tuned for that. I'll be starting that one. Let me check and see if I can find on the calendar exactly when that is. But then I really have to wrap this up because I am over time. Oh, sorry. It doesn't start for a few weeks, end of July. Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, guys. I have just gotten booked so far out all of a sudden. Like, it seems like everybody has just decided that they want to commission stuff all at once. And it has been a little bit tough for people to get time slots within a reasonable time frame. So my apologies for that. But this was really fun to read. It was just such a wild, like, world, the whole setup and everything. And I'm very interested in continuing into this universe. So thank you, Abbey, very much for commissioning all of this. It's been really great. I hope that you guys listening have been having fun with it. And I know sometimes people listen even though they haven't read the books and then they'll pick it up later. So if anybody does that, let me know. I'll be interested to hear. And yeah, Abbey says, thank you. I really enjoyed your coverage. Oh, good. Yay. And yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you all again so much. And I will be seeing you again soon. Well, not soon, but I will be seeing you again with a new episode. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.